just think about it. The opportunity to get out into nature, to engage with a living creature who could choose to ignore you, but yet chooses to participate with you. It's very invigorating.
That's the voice of Judy Smith, and she's going to tell us about horses helping people. Here are some ways horses can help.
Hippotherapy is harnessing the movement of the horse as a dynamic platform. And so the equine specialist would work with an OT, a PT, or a speech therapist to achieve those therapeutic outcomes. We have equine assisted learning. An example of that would be corporate activities when they need to work on communication skills and they put them in the arena with the horse. And also equine-assisted psychotherapy. And in that role, the equine specialist partners or pairs with a therapist to achieve mental health outcomes.
I bet you have questions about equine-assisted therapy, like how long has it been around? Or what makes horses such effective therapeutic tools? Well, Judy answered those questions for me and you, and she also told me how her research brought a herd of horses together to serve some of Utah's veterans. Hello, and welcome to Blue Plate Research. To get us started, here's some remarks from the people who made this event possible.
Hello, my name is Lisa Burrow. I'm the Vice President for Research at Utah State University. Thank you for joining us today for our initial Blue Plate Research presentation titled Rethinking Therapy. With our partners, Regents Blue Cross Blue Shield of Utah, today we will provide you with easy to understand information about health and well-being that is important to the state of Utah. You will hear from 3 exceptional USU faculty researchers who will talk about new approaches to mental, physical, and emotional well-being. You'll hear how they're developing web-based, equine-assisted, and music therapy. If you're joining us live, I encourage you to join us afterwards for a live Zoom Q&A with the researchers themselves. The link to that session can be found in the video description or at blueplateresearch.usu.edu. Thank you.
As new research builds on previous findings, we understand more about stuff. And today's presentation is going to work the same way. You'll better understand the therapeutic process because today's researchers build on each other's conversations. My name is Wyatt Trauber, and this is Blue Plate Research. Judy Smith researches equine-assisted therapy, and Dr. Maureen Hearns researches music therapy. You're actually going to meet them in a little bit, because right now I'm talking to Dr. Mike Levin. He researches acceptance and commitment therapy and self-help. So, Mike, what do people get wrong when they are picturing therapy?
The classic view of therapy and what it looks like is this kind of psychoanalysis. You're just going to reflect in your head and sort of the other person's just writing notes, and it's very hierarchical. And I think that much of therapy is much more like working with a coach. You're working with someone on shared goals and really actively doing stuff.
Yeah. I guess you could kind of think of therapy as an app store. And we have all these options like the music therapy app and the equine therapy app and the self-help app. How do you view the relationship between interventions?
I think people generally go in to see a therapist because life's not working right, because they're in distress, and any one approach isn't necessarily sufficient. We can do good work in training and research to figure out other ways to reach people where they're stuck and to find novel ways to get people unstuck. With an app store metaphor, the idea is, we might have one app that we really like, but it doesn't work for everybody. In act, the way we see it is that, it's not that necessarily feeling depressed in and of itself is the problem. Maybe the problem really is how depression is just dominating life and getting in the way of living a life that matters. So our ultimate goal is really helping people to identify and move towards the things that really matter to them.
So a few days ago, I interviewed Judy Smith and Maureen Hearns, and I took pieces of their conversations and I put them together, and I'm going to play them for you now. We're going to talk about how their interventions help sidestep the stigma people have to therapy sometimes, how they track progress, and how they're adding to the research literature. But we're actually going to get started with how these fields have kind of developed. So here's the first video. Yeah, can you tell me about the history of equine therapy, the history of music therapy?
The cellular structure of our body, the molecular structure of our body will change according to different sounds that it is experiencing. So the Native Americans understood this at some level, and they would use different sound frequencies to play, for a person who was ill. And
there's some early writings in the literature that we see the horse was engaged in Greek and Roman times in a holistic or healing capacity. We have clear records from World War I in Britain. Often it would improve the soldier's mood, but then those that had lost limb, they found that putting them on the horse, they saw that locomotion, that sense of balance and movement began to improve.
In America, after World War I, the government started programs where there were choirs and there were bands, and some of the early pioneers in music therapy were people that organized those experiences for our men and women who came back from combat service.
So Mike, I guess my question is, what's the history of self-help?
So this concept of self-help, it started with books, and that's been around for decades and decades. But what treatment developers started to do is they started to take their evidence-based therapies and say, hey, can we do a self-guided self-help books where we walk people through the same skills they would learn in therapy, but on their own pace, to help make meaningful changes in their lives. And there's been research on that going back into, I believe, like the 70s, for example, with addictions, and showing that, yeah, that does seem to work. As we started to get into the digital age, with technology, we have so many more exciting, innovative, and impactful ways to reach people in their lives and to teach them skills that we normally would teach in therapy.
So in talking to all of you, I've kind of learned that different people need different things. And in this clip, Judy Smith is going to tell us how horses can help veterans right here in Utah.
We are very unaware of the body language that we send. The horse has an incredible capacity to reflect what's going on. If that person is really uptight, really nervous, you may see it in the horse being really anxious. If that person needs some confidence and needs to step up their energy and be more assertive, you might see a horse that just won't move, won't do a thing. Here's this highly reactive flight animal, and they're saying, I'm going to reflect what you're doing and show you what you're showing me.
In thinking about what the veterans are experiencing as they're going through this program, what is it like to see those veterans experiencing so many emotions together?
It's really a privilege. I went into it thinking that, it's going to be the dynamic of this equine-human bond that's going to be a powerful kind of change agent and healing process. But it's also a peer mentor model. The veteran who's participating, we call them VIPs, pick out a horse and make this relationship with a horse. They also have an opportunity then to work with a peer mentor. My early findings of the model, that peer relationship and then the horse had equal importance, which was wonderful because often, like in the first cohort that we had with the VA, we had two veterans that one hadn't been out of his house in 3 months. The other one, the only way his wife could get him out of the house was she wouldn't get the mail and he had to walk to the mailbox. These are individuals who were struggling, functioning in human relationships, and they had begun to detach from life. And the horse was just enough to get them out that door the first time, and they saw enough of opportunity that they felt, okay, this is a safe place. This is something that's really intriguing. I could see myself doing this. This is a skill that I'd like to gain. And once we can get them hooked, the relationships grow.
One of the things I think is so interesting about the equine assisted therapy and music therapy, just as I learn more about it from my colleagues, is that it gives another pathway to engage people in self-exploration and finding ways to get moving in their lives, to get unstuck. I think one of the ways people get stuck sometimes is the stigma that these labels of psychological disorders can carry in our culture. And although I think our culture is changing, and I hope it continues to change in that way, we don't always need to go into that model of this is a disease and disorder and let's treat the disease and disorder. I think we can think of this much more holistically, and there's so many ways that we can help people engage in improving their lives. With self-help, you get this ability to access these programs in the privacy of your own home, and really kind of like between you and you. I think that's really nice as a first step also. You can like try these skills out, and if you're like, hey, I'm liking this is useful, you could always start therapy afterwards. So it can give you a taste of what you might be doing in therapy. There is this cultural baggage that gets them stuck. These other pathways can feel more affirming as people look at how do I engage in working with an animal, playing music, exploring narratives. There's a lot of ways to explore our own lives and ways to make changes.
Yeah, that actually fits really nicely with what I have from Dr. Hearns. In talking to Judy Smith, she mentioned that the charisma of horses is a really nice entry point to people getting help. They want to spend time with horses, so they're willing to go through that work. Do you notice something similar with music?
Absolutely. The one clientele I think of a lot is with the at-risk adolescent. They seem to be very opposed to the concept of therapy in their lives. But if you ask them to join in with you in music making experiences, they're pretty into that and they have a lot of fun. And they can make progress in things like learning how to work well with others, have better relationships with people, be part of a team effort in creating an ensemble, learning to accept responsibility and accountability if they're part of a band or something like that. And they don't even realize they're in therapy. They just think they're having a great time, and yet they're making tremendous personal progress and goals. And so maybe that's a lot like it is with equine therapy.
Yeah. Judy works a lot with veterans. They have to learn how to perceive themselves, and because the horses pick up on their inner stress. How does music help these survivors of domestic abuse perceive themselves differently or perceive the world differently?
When they write a song and then they share that song with others and others validate that experience, when they create an artwork and others see in that artwork and validate for them what it was they were trying to express, their sense of self-esteem is incredibly enhanced. And realizing that they themselves, they don't need to change. What they're doing is absolutely the best for them at this time. They are enough. And so it's taking that experience from the music, out of the music, into their own personal life.
As I was putting those clips together, I was really struck by the emphasis on relationship. That theme just kind of kept popping up. How do relationships fit into the self-help world?
One of our concerns with self-guided interventions is that, what's different from typical therapy is the therapist isn't there. And that is a challenge. I think it's why we see that people don't stick to these self-guided resources as well as they would stick to therapy. And so I think the relationship is so key. How we've tried to solve in part is by finding ways to bring the relationship back in. In several of our projects, we'll have a coach, someone who's not providing like intensive therapy, but they're just checking in, helping provide what we call supportive accountability, making someone feel supported by someone, like, hey, there's someone out there who cares for me, and accountable, hey, there's someone out there and they know if I'm doing this or not. And that does seem to help improve people sticking to these programs.
Yeah. I think it must be so interesting to watch people as they're going through the therapy process. And that's why I asked Judy and Maureen this question. What is it like for you to watch people as they go from maybe never riding a horse before to sitting on a horse for the first time?
We're all smiles. Sometimes that first ride, if maybe they are a young rider, and even if they're an older rider, they might be tense, a little anxious, the unknown. Once we have them up there, and by the time we get them in the arena and that horse begins to move, all of that anxiety melts away and the grins come out.
How do you gauge if somebody's making progress?
We always begin our work with a client with an assessment where we identify their needs and we establish specific goals for them. We're always evaluating, is the client making progress towards this specific goal that we identified at the initial onset of treatment? If they are, we will continue with that goal until it has been reached and sustained, or if they're not, we would reassess and reestablish a different goal, a different objective to work with. But it's always an ongoing process of evaluation.
Yeah. What is it like for you to witness progress?
I have witnessed individuals speak their first words through the therapeutic process in writing. I've seen writers who couldn't focus learn to be able to focus and follow multiple step directions through that engagement with the horse and the process of learning to ride.
You know, witnessing is a profound experience, to witness someone's process in therapy. Most of my personal work has been with survivors of domestic violence. And as I've witnessed their process in therapy and seen them move from that victim to that survivor and to take back their life as much as they possibly could, that's an intimate experience, and that's a unique experience, and one that I regard very, very sacred.
So we don't all have a Marine to track the progress we make through therapy. What tools are inside of the ACT guide that can help people understand their progress?
Tracking progress is so key because we need to have a metric to come back to, both for the individual, for them to know, like, am I getting what I need out of this? Do I need to make a change? And then certainly from the side of providing services to people. It's been a big challenge as we get into self-guided types of approaches like ACT Guide, because we're not working one-on-one. That allows us to make it scalable and cheap, but it also does create that problem of we're not in the room. So we focus a lot on self-reflection, helping people to continue to notice, okay, how are you making progress in areas like doing the things that matter to you? And continuing to come back to, am I moving towards my values? Am I doing the things that really matter? If I'm getting stuck somewhere, okay, what's that, my toolbox again? What can I bring back? We do have people fill out a questionnaires at the beginning of using ACT Guide and then again at the end to provide an opportunity for self-reflection, to notice how have they made changes, where do they continue to want to grow.
So Judy Smith and Dr. Hearns both have like these powerful experiences of seeing change happening in people. And as you're monitoring data that you get from the ACT Guide, do you have a similar experience with like Excel spreadsheets?
It is a different experience, you know, when we're kind of thinking of this more on like a numbers game, public health level, like getting this out more. I do miss just working face to face with clients, and I haven't been doing that work as we're doing more in the self-guided area. It's really exciting though still to see those numbers, to see that, hey, there's a lot of people getting services. And you know, research, it's about like having the heart for it, and it's so disappointing and challenging how we can develop these really effective treatments, but for many people they never get access to it. And so I do get excited at the numbers, and I get excited to see how many people, for example at USU, how many students are using the program, and they're just getting another support to help hopefully make their life a little bit better.
Yeah. So in this last video, Dr. Hearns and Judy Smith are going to talk about how their research is contributing to the therapeutic fields that they are in. And after that, I want to hear how you contribute to your field. So let's watch this last video.
So my research has supported the use of music to restructure and rebuild relationships between parent and child that have been severed because of the abusive relationships that have existed in their home.
Yeah. How have you added? What was there before, and how have you helped?
Initially, there was little research that had been done with survivors of domestic violence. In 2004, Dr. Elizabeth York was just beginning a research here at CAPSA that she entitled Finding Voice. When I became the director, I continued her research to see if indeed the creative arts could be beneficial with helping survivors of domestic violence. And 10 sessions of that were based on establishing trust with the clients. As they became empowered and in charge of their own work and in charge of their own therapy, they ended up telling us, this is how we want to make our music. We want to tell people our story. And that was a big change from where they came in those first initial sessions. And we've seen from that a lot of participant-based action research evolve. And a lot of that had its beginnings with our work, and also obviously with work of other therapists as well.
Like, what was the existing research of how to train a therapy horse?
So there isn't much. there isn't much. And it's challenging because, you know, in the therapy setting, whether we're doing ground activities or under saddle, we're engaging a 1,000-pound animal with fragile populations. And one of the current projects that my graduate assistant and I are working on is developing a reliable evaluation tool. And our goal is to validate that tool, that it can be used across the whole field.
Tell me more about that tool. What things is it measuring?
We look at, is the horse sound? Is this horse suitable in temperament? We would want to see, will that horse stand quietly? Can this horse respond to basic cues, backing up, moving forward, moving over? And we're going to utilize heart rate monitor and perhaps probably other stress indicators like cortisol to determine, even if this horse is not displaying an inappropriate behavior or an uncooperative behavior, you know, is the horse experiencing some type of stress? If this horse is actually compliant or agreeable or participating in the activity.
So, Mike, what did the research field on self-help look like before you came along?
So there was a growing and strong body of research when I was in graduate school on more traditional cognitive behavioral therapy as a way to address depression, anxiety, a wide range of different mental health concerns. And we'd already had a pretty good sense that you can learn these things at your own pace. But we hadn't yet studied ACT in that format. And so I was one of the first researchers looking at, can we similarly teach these arguably more experiential exercises and this kind of different approach to approaching mental health in a self-guided format online. And so we were looking to build on that by looking at how we can study this with ACT.
So that's everything I was able to cram into this 20-minute video. If you want to listen to more of the conversations I've had with these researchers, check out the Instead podcast. Judy Smith is episode 35, and it's live right now. Maureen Hearns will be coming out in a week or so, and we have an episode with Dr. Levin from back in March. So make sure to check that out, but do it later, because right now you need to get over to the Q&A. So right now I'm going to go to blueplateresearch.usu.edu, and I'm going to select this link, and that's going to take me right to the Q&A.